My ex accused me of being her daughter's father for 15 years, but I was out of town when she got pregnant. Then I discovered she accused 5 other men. And when the daughter turned 17, I did something that changed everything. I'm 38 years old, work in construction as an independent contractor, and honestly, I need to tell this story because it's been over 15 years since this nightmare started, and only recently did it really get resolved. The thing is that my ex-girlfriend, Stephanie, accused me of being her daughter's father for all that time. And when I say she accused me, I don't just mean me. I mean, it turns out I was just one of several guys. She did the exact same thing too. But I'm going to start from the beginning because otherwise none of this makes sense. I met Stephanie when I was like 22 years old. She was 21, I think, and we dated for a while. I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 months total. It wasn't anything special, you know. We were young, and the relationship was pretty casual. I was just starting out in construction back then, taking contracts wherever I could. Sometimes I had to go away for several weeks to other places to work on big projects. Stephanie worked in retail, a clothing store, at the mall, and when we started dating, everything seemed normal, like a regular relationship without much drama. The problem started when I accepted a contract that took me out of town for 5 or 6 weeks. I don't remember exactly how long, but I know it was over a month. It was a good job, paid well, and I needed the money, so I didn't think twice about it. Stephanie wasn't too happy about me leaving for that long, but she didn't make a scene either, or so I thought. While I was gone, we'd talk on the phone occasionally. Nothing weird. Normal messages, that kind of thing. I came back home on a Friday afternoon, tired as hell because we'd been working really long shifts to finish the project on time, and the first thing I wanted was to sleep for like 12 hours straight. But then Stephanie showed up at my apartment that same night, like 9 or 10 at night, and told me she needed to talk to me about something important. I remember perfectly because she had that face, you know, like when someone's about to give you news they know you're not going to want to hear. She sat down on my couch and just dropped it on me. I'm pregnant. Just like that, no preamble. And when I asked her how far along she was, she told me between 4 and 7 weeks. Something like that. And that's when my brain started doing the math. You know what I mean? Because I had been gone 5 or 6 full weeks, hadn't come back even once that whole time, and if she was 4 to 7 weeks pregnant, then the numbers just didn't add up. I said, "Wait, that doesn't make sense. I haven't been here in over a month. How could it be mine?" And she got super defensive immediately. Started saying that maybe the dates weren't exact, that doctors sometimes get those things wrong, that maybe it happened right before I left, even though we both knew that wasn't true. The conversation got tense really fast, and I said, "Look, if this baby is mine, then there's no problem with us getting a paternity test when it's born, right?" And that's when everything changed. She got really angry, started yelling at me about how could I ask her something like that it was insulting, that if I really loved her I wouldn't need any test, all that speech. But I wasn't going to give in on that because the truth was obvious to me. The numbers didn't add up and she knew it. I told her I was sorry, but if she wanted me to be part of that baby's life, then we needed to do the test, period. It wasn't negotiable for me. Stephanie kept insisting, crying, telling me I was a bastard, that I was abandoning her at the most important moment of her life, basically trying to make me feel guilty. But something inside me was telling me she was lying, like my gut screaming at me to get away from that situation as fast as possible. I ended the relationship that same night. I told her I didn't want to continue with her, that if the baby turned out to be mine, then obviously I was going to fulfill my responsibilities, but that our relationship as a couple was over. She didn't accept the breakup. Not at all. She kept calling me every day, showing up at my apartment without warning, looking for me at work. It was exhausting. I had to block her number after a couple of weeks because she wouldn't stop sending me messages, literally hundreds of messages a day. And then the baby was born. They named her Chloe, and that's when things got really crazy. Stephanie started telling everyone that I was Chloe's father and that I had abandoned them. Her whole family, her friends, people she didn't even know well. Basically, she built this whole narrative that I was this horrible guy who left his pregnant girlfriend and didn't want to take responsibility. And people believed her, obviously, because she was a good actress and knew how to play the victim. I tried to explain the truth to some people, that the timing didn't match up, and that she had refused to do the paternity test. But you know how it is. A lot of people automatically assume the guy is the bad guy in these situations. But the worst part was when she started showing up at places where I was, always with Chloe. If I went to the grocery store, there she was, with the kid. If I went out with friends, suddenly, she'd appear at the same restaurant. If I was working on some project, she'd find a way to know where and show up there, always with the same speech. That Chloe needed to know her father, that I was being selfish, that the girl deserved to have a complete family. It was basically harassment, but back then it wasn't as easy to do something about it legally as it is now. After like 2 years of this, when Chloe was already 2 years old, I got my first restraining order against Stephanie. It was a whole process. I had to document all the times she had shown up uninvited, all the messages she sent me from different numbers because I had blocked hers, all the scenes she made in public. The judge gave me the order, but it only lasted 2 years, so when it expired, I had to renew it. And that's how I was for years, renewing that damn restraining order every 2 years like clockwork. But Stephanie didn't stop. She violated the order constantly, showed up anyway even though she knew she couldn't come near me. They arrested her a couple of times for it, but it was never anything serious, like a night in jail, and that's it. She'd get out and continue with the same thing. It was like she was obsessed, and I didn't understand why she just didn't move on with her life and leave me alone. If I wasn't the father, why keep up this lie for years? What did she gain from it? It made no sense to me. The thing is, this went on and on. Chloe grew up and I kept seeing photos of her on social media because mutual friends would share them. I felt bad for the kid, honestly, because she wasn't to blame for any of this, but I also wasn't going to let Stephanie manipulate me using the kid, you know what I mean? It was a horrible situation for everyone, especially for Chloe who was growing up with all this lie on top of her. Then something happened that changed everything. I was like 33 years old at that point, so 10 or 11 years had passed since Chloe was born. I was having a beer with my friend Lucas at a bar, a Friday after work, and out of nowhere he says to me, "Hey, do you remember Stephanie?" And I'm like, "Of course I remember. Why?" And Lucas tells me he'd been talking to this guy named Greg at the gym, and that Greg had told him this story about his crazy ex-girlfriend who had accused him of being her daughter's father years ago. And when Lucas describes the situation to me, I realize it sounds identical to mine, like exactly the same. I ask him what Greg's ex's name is, and he says, "Stephanie. She has a daughter named Chloe." I couldn't believe it. I literally felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on me. I told Lucas to get me Greg's contact immediately because I needed to talk to him. The three of us met the next day, a Saturday morning at a coffee shop, and when Greg started telling me his story, it was like hearing my own experience. Stephanie had told him she was pregnant. He had been away for work, right at the time of conception. She had refused to do the paternity test. She had started harassing him after he broke up with her. Everything identical. Greg had also gotten restraining orders against her, had renewed them for years, the whole story. But Greg told me he knew of at least one other guy, someone named Paul, that Stephanie had done the same thing to. And that's when I understood this wasn't just something personal with me or with Greg. This was a pattern of behavior from Stephanie. She had been doing this with multiple men for over a decade, basically rotating between us, asking some for money, others for attention, using Chloe as a tool to manipulate everyone. It was sick and twisted on a level I can't even describe properly. We contacted Paul, who confirmed the same story. And then we started asking around discreetly, and we found there were more guys, like 5 or 6 in total that we had discovered up to that point. All with the same experience, all harassed for years, all with restraining orders, all wondering why this woman wouldn't leave them alone. We decided to do something about it because this wasn't just harassment anymore. This was fraud, manipulation, and who knows what else. We all got together, hired a lawyer between all of us because none of us had the money to pay for one on our own, and filed a case together against Stephanie. The lawyer told us we had a solid case because it was clear she had been lying and manipulating multiple people for years. We asked for a mandatory paternity test to be done to determine once and for all who Chloe's real father was, because obviously it was one of us or someone we didn't even know yet. Stephanie opposed it with everything. Her lawyer argued we had no right to force her to do the test, that it was invasive, that it would traumatize Chloe. who was already like 12 years old at that point. Everything you can think of. But the judge didn't buy any of it. The judge was a woman in her 50s who looked super serious, and when she heard all our testimonies and saw all the evidence of harassment, the restraining orders, the messages, the photos, everything, she basically told Stephanie the paternity test was going to happen yes or yes, that there was no option. I remember the day the results came out. We were all in court, the 5 or 6 guys who had filed the case, plus the lawyer. Stephanie was there with her lawyer, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Chloe wasn't present because the judge had decided it was better that way. The judge opened the envelope with the results and started reading one by one. Connor, not the father. Greg, not the father. Paul, not the father. And so on with all of us. None of the men present in that courtroom was Chloe's biological father. Stephanie had a breakdown right there in court. She started screaming that the results were wrong, that the lab had made a mistake, that this was impossible. The judge told her to calm down, but she wouldn't stop, kept screaming and crying until they had to remove her from the room. Outside, she violated the restraining order I still had in effect, came up to me yelling that I was a coward and that I had ruined her life, and ended up arrested again. That time they did keep her several days in jail, not just one night. A few months after all this, I got a call from an older woman who introduced herself as Florence, Chloe's great-grandmother on Stephanie's mother's side. She told me she had taken full custody of Chloe because Stephanie clearly wasn't in any condition to care for her properly. Florence apologized to me, told me she had no idea about everything Stephanie had been doing for years, that if she had known, she would have intervened sooner. She thanked me for finally seeking the truth because Chloe deserved to know who her real father was. It was a weird conversation, but also like liberating, you know? Because finally someone from Stephanie's family was acknowledging that all this had been crazy. About a year after that, when Chloe was already 13 or 14 years old, I received a letter from her. Handwritten on notebook paper, like the letters you write in school. In the letter, Chloe apologized for everything that had happened, told me she now understood that her mom had lied to her whole life, that she was confused about who she really was and why her mom had done all that. She told me she didn't expect me to respond or anything, she just wanted me to know she was very sorry. I cried when I read that letter. I'm not going to lie. This girl hadn't done anything wrong and had grown up in the middle of all this lie, believing I was her father who had abandoned her, living with the rejection that must have generated. I didn't respond immediately because I didn't know what to say. What do you tell a teenager who just found out her whole life was a lie? But I kept the letter, and after thinking about it a lot, I sent her a short one saying I had nothing against her, that she wasn't responsible for her mother's decisions, and that I wished her the best in her life. I thought that would be the end of it, that I could finally close this horrible chapter of my life and move forward. But about 2 years ago, when Chloe was already 17, she contacted me again. This time by text message, she had gotten my number somehow. Probably Florence gave it to her. She told me she was trying to find her real biological father and asked if I could help her. At first, I wasn't sure I wanted to get involved in this again. You know, I had spent so much time trying to leave it all behind. But I thought about this girl who was about to turn 18 and didn't know who her father was, and I felt I had to help her if I could. I asked her if her mom had told her anything useful, and she said Stephanie kept insisting I was the father, or that Greg was the father. Basically kept lying even after the DNA results had proven none of us were. Typical Stephanie, could never admit the truth. I asked Chloe if there was any old photo from when her mom was pregnant or when she was a baby, where some man appeared. She sent me a photo that Florence had found in a box of old stuff, a photo of Stephanie pregnant with a guy none of us knew. With that photo, we started investigating. I showed the photo to Lucas and some friends who had known Stephanie back then, like 18 years ago already, to see if anyone recognized the guy. A friend of a friend said the guy in the photo looked like someone who had worked at the same retail store as Stephanie. Years ago, someone named Robert. We got more information about Robert, where he lived now, that kind of thing. It wasn't that hard to find him on social media. Chloe contacted him directly, sent him a message explaining the situation, and Robert was in shock. Apparently, he didn't even know Stephanie had had a daughter. They had dated briefly when he worked at that store, like for 2 or 3 months tops, and then he had quit and moved to another state for a better job. He never knew she was pregnant. But when we showed him the photo and gave him the dates, he remembered they had been together at that time. Robert agreed to take the DNA test. I think part of him wanted to know the truth too, you know? Because if Chloe was his daughter, then he had a 17-year-old daughter he didn't know existed. The results took like 2 weeks to come in, and when they arrived, they confirmed what we already suspected. Robert was Chloe's biological father. 99.9% probability. Chloe finally met her real father last year. Robert is a good guy, has a wife and 2 younger kids, and they've been building a relationship slowly. It's not easy, obviously. Meeting your father when you're almost an adult. But Chloe wrote me a few months ago saying she was happy to finally know the truth. She thanked me for helping her find Robert and told me she could now start building her own life with real answers instead of her mom's lies. Stephanie, for her part, keeps denying Robert is the father. Even after seeing the DNA results, she keeps saying the labs are wrong, that there's a conspiracy against her, all kinds of crazy theories. Florence told me Stephanie has had several mental health episodes and has been going in and out of treatment. Apparently she always had problems, but no one had realized how serious they were until all this exploded. As for me, I was finally able to let go of all that anger and frustration I carried for over 15 years. I'm not going to say it was easy because it wasn't. I spent years feeling powerless, harassed, not understanding why all this was happening to me. There were moments when I thought I was going to go crazy too. Moments when I just wanted to move to another state and disappear so I wouldn't have to deal with Stephanie anymore. But I'm glad I stayed and fought for the truth, not just for me, but for all the other guys who were going through the same thing, and especially for Chloe, who deserved to know the truth about who she was. About a month ago, I ran into Paul at the grocery store, one of the other guys who had also been accused by Stephanie. We caught up briefly, and he told me he had started therapy last year to process everything that had happened. He said it had affected him more than he thought, that he had developed trust issues in relationships, that it was hard for him to connect with other people because he was always afraid of being manipulated. And I completely understand what he meant because I went through something similar too, though fortunately I was able to overcome it with time. Last week, Chloe turned 18. She sent me a message saying she'd had a small dinner with Florence, Robert, and Robert's family, and that for the first time in her life she felt like she had a real and honest family. She sent me a photo of the cake and everyone looked happy. I didn't respond with much, just wished her happy birthday and told her I was glad she was okay. I don't feel like I need to have a close relationship with her. That would be weird for everyone. But I'm glad to know she's okay and that she finally has the truth she always deserved. I guess if I learned anything from all this, it's that the truth always comes out, eventually. It can take years. It can be painful to get to it, but it's worth fighting for it. And I also learned there are people in this world who have serious problems you can't fix on your own no matter how hard you try, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is protect yourself and let other professionals handle the situation. It took me a long time to understand that at first, I thought maybe if I talked to Stephanie the right way, or if I found the exact words, she would finally admit the truth. But some people are so deep into their own lies that they can't see reality anymore, and it's not your job to save them from themselves.